that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others.
This is from the Creed of the Church of Scientology.
Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the Scientology, and today I am here once again for part two of going over statistical management with Chris Shelton. Thank you for joining me today.
No problem.
I had a good time talking with you last time, so I've still got a lot of questions, hopefully, that we can cover today. And today we're going to be looking at a real stat graph and interpreting it.
Which won't be too hard because you can't do much with one graph, but it'll be interesting.
It's only if you have a binder that you can start comparing and checking.
Yeah, you start really doing analysis. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to look at this graph. What you got? Oh, this is, Jesus, 79. Wow. So yeah, that graph goes up and it goes down and it goes up, it goes down. This is a graph that is designed to try to win the birthday game. This is also a graph that tells you that they really get to work every
Roughly every two to three
one,
weeks.
2, 3, about every 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks is when they really get to work. The rest of the weeks, they're just kind of, pulling in what they're pulling in. But those spike weeks, it's about every 3 or 4 weeks, right? If you count the dots.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody is either, there's a number of different interpretations possible here. That's why we need data. But that's what this tells you. And I said the thing about the birthday game because you get points in the birthday game. The way you get maximal points is on 3-week trends of affluence. And this has a number of affluence, 3-week affluences buried in it, right? It goes, it crashes, and then it's, 3 weeks of up, 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 and then it crashes, and it's 2 to 3 weeks of up, and then it crashes and back up, and that's you don't get anything obviously for crashing the statistics. So that week you're going to eat it on points, but you try to keep it on trend. And so, for example, let's take a look at the very first spike of 582,000 or whatever it says there, right? Yeah, 582 Gs. That's pretty good for AO. That's about right. 500,600,000 in a week is typical. They've done $1 million weeks. Not frequently, but I believe it's happened in its history. And this is back in 1979, by the way. So this first spike is a nice affluence, right? Boom, boom, way up it goes, and then it crashes in this non-existence trend. I mean, straight down. So on a 3-week trend, if you look at the first 3 lines of the graph, it goes up and then it goes way up and then it comes crashing down. The trend of just those 3 lines is your 3-week trend. 1, 2, 3. We'll be returning to this concept with management and statistics, because this is how we at management would read statistics, is in 3-week trends. We didn't just look at one line, we looked at 3. One dot, what was it? It was one dot. I don't remember all the phrasing, but anyway, this is going down on a 3-week trend. If you just look at those first 3 lines, right? And that trend is its own 3-week condition of, it's pretty danger. I mean, you could maybe argue emergency, but I'm trend-wise, that's danger, right? That's like, hey, you got to change what you're doing and get things going. But you try to envision doing this over a 3-week period rather than a 1-week period. Like, you've got to take this danger formula and sort of stretch it out a bit. What do I need to do to get them in 3 weeks from now to be like spiked, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, we at management level would read the graph. At the org level, they're only paying attention to it mostly on a week-to-week basis. But the birthday game points are also assigned based on the 3-week trend. So even if you're going to have the statistic go down, you want to keep it so that it's still squeaking up above where it was 3 weeks ago, so the trend keeps going up. And that's why I said this is a birthday game graph, because if you break it down into 3-week chunks or trends or whatever, you see there are birthday game points here all over the place.
Yep.
But there's no expansion. And the birthday game is supposed to be a game of expansion. The whole point system is built on the idea that you have to get the statistics to go up. So how do you game the game? You get them to go up for 3 weeks and you crash it, and then you get them to go up for 3 weeks and you crash it. And if you're getting your statistics to do that often enough, you'll get more points than anybody else. And you don't have to actually expand anything. This graph overall, if you look at the entire graph, is emergency. It's flatline. It's not really going anywhere. They have spikes and then it goes crashing, and they spike it and it goes back down again. It's flat trending down. Mm-hmm. And so this is a long-term 6-month emergency trend on the part of AOLA during that time, even though they're making all this money, right? And winning the birthday game, or at least getting lots of birthday game points, they're really not going anywhere. So that's what I can. That's my. Those are all my immediate thoughts about that graph from a Scientological point of view, right? I mean, you know, from a business world point of view, there's a lot of different ways you could look at that income graph, but everything I just offered was from a Scientology management point of view.
And from an outsider's perspective, if I hadn't been told that points were based on that 3-week trend, I would have, if I hadn't seen this graph and I didn't know that, I would have assumed that if they had lots of points, that must have meant expansion.
Which is what you're supposed to assume. The people who win the birthday game every year are the ones who are supposed to have actually grown the most. That's the entire point. But I think, as I just demonstrated, and this graph is all too typical, of big producing organizations, is they'll have these spike weeks and then crash it. But the executive directors and the people who are the ones who run the orgs, the person who's in charge, those folks are trying to get the prestige of winning the birthday game every year, so they're watching the 3-week trends, and this is one of the points of communication between management and the orgs is birthday game points, on the assumption that if you get the birthday game points and you get the statistics, then you're going to have expansion. And isn't that funny that the entire basic assumption that the whole thing is built on is provably false when you actually break down how it works in the real world versus how it works in theory. Mm-hmm. And that is a theme we might return to a couple times in all of this, is there is the theoretical, wow, this looks really great on paper, and then there's how it really works in the real world, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and having been org staff at an executive level for 8 years, right, or many years in Santa Barbara, and then management, at the continental level for 8 years, like I had some experience with this. This was very much in my managing orgs was very much my life for a long time.
So it almost seems like they didn't care about the week to week. They were focused on that 3-week trend.
Well, yeah, you strategize for it, right? Like I think we mentioned, or I've certainly mentioned at one point, and maybe somebody asked me this in a Q&A, but could you? No, I think you did. Could you hold off on your production and save it for the next week? You bet you can. Now, very rarely is that sort of thing happening on the income lines of Scientology, having to do with income, right? That's at its heart, it's a money-making scam. It's there to make money.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? For all practical purposes. It's got other, occult underpinnings, and Hubbard had other intentions of what he was doing with Scientology, but for what it does in the real world, it's ripping people off of their money. And so it's so as L. Ron Hubbard himself said, if an organization is not pulling in money with a high-powered vacuum, then it's off the rails. It's not doing its job. And so income is the most tightly monitored and important statistic of every organization. They might preach that it's other statistics. Paid completions is the statistic of an organization. That's what it's supposed to be producing, is paid completions. People who have paid for services and completed them. And there's a point system for that. That's the actual statistic that the org is managed on. But you could have PDC out the roof, but if your income ain't going anywhere, right, and it's consistently low, you're never going to be in anybody's good graces, you know. So it's all about that money. That is really the sort of center of the Scientology universe and what it revolves around.
Now, do you have anything to say related to, because I'm looking and it's not like most of the crashes are not emergency condition. They're definitely, I would say, non-existent, right?
Oh yeah. Steep dangers and non-E. Yeah.
Do you have any idea of why they are so continuously non-E?
Because I don't. And that's where the data comes in as part of the analysis, is you have to know things like, how many regs are there?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know. I can't tell from this graph. I could guess lots of things. For example, one thing I could guess is that there's a good reg on post, and it takes him or her about 2 to 3 weeks to set up a big, nice, juicy cycle, as we would call them, right? Reg cycles, you know, a big amount of money being paid by one person, probably a package of auditing or materials or whatever it is, AOLA, you know, it's OT level, so it's a lot of auditing is being sold there. And it takes a few weeks sometimes to set that up with somebody. It's not just, bang your credit card. Sometimes they got to take a mortgage out, and that takes time. That's not just call your bank and get the loan over the phone. So they have to work those things, and they have long lists of current cycles that they're always working on. They're trying to move them forward. Regs are probably some of the most, you know, forward-thinking people by necessity in Scientology, as far as setting stuff up for a week or 2 or 3 out, because that's the real world way that money works, and they have to work that way to get the money in. So they'll have their day organized around, how do I push all these things forward, and if possible, take the time out of it so that I can get that money in before Thursday too. But they kind of have a lineup, and they work that lineup, and it gets to the point in the orgs where the executive director will come down and meet directly with the regs and go over their lineup, point by point, person by person. What's the strategy? What's the, you know, what are the step by steps to get this much money out of this person this week? Or, okay, it's going to be next week, so what are the steps now? You know, that kind of thing is sort of a lot of the conversations that go on at the org level about income and getting it.
It's definitely helpful to my research with getting this input, because I would have never thought about this just from reading the theory alone.
Exactly. It's the very practical rubber meets the road of, you got to get money in. How do you do that? You got to hustle. That's what you got to do. That's what the regs are doing all the time. They're constantly hustling, you know. And it's different from the other staff who have more fixed. It's not that they don't have a fixed position in the org, but, you know, a course room supervisor isn't on the phone all day. They can't be. They can't be on a phone ever, right? They're in the course room supervising. Mm-hmm. So their whole world is that room. Everything they do is happening there. The reg has the whole world, right? They got all those people out there. If they got to go to their house, if they got to fly to a location distant from the org because there's a hot prospect in Nebraska, you know, get to the airport, baby, we're going, and off they go. This is the life of a reg, right? It's get that money in, and we don't really care where it's coming from.
Yet you talk about, I know we talked about this last time, but you talk about how the course supervisor's entire life is that course room.
Pretty much.
Yet he's still getting shit on for not getting people in.
Oh yeah, but the mechanism that L. Ron Hubbard devised for course room supervisors to control the population of their classrooms is to run a standard course room. And if you're and this is one of the most magical thinking places in a Scientology organization. I've never called it that before, but that is actually absolutely what it is. And I did my oh man, did I run around the pole on this one like 1,000 times as a course supervisor. If your course room is empty, if there are not, there's 2 students in there and you got room for 20, right? That's a pretty empty looking room and it's embarrassing. And you're supposed to have a packed course room all the time. They're supposed to be, practically standing room only is the sign of a good course room. Well, that is and the metric that's judged by is the standardness of the supervisor. If it's good, it fills up. If the supervisor is doing a shit job, violating policy, telling the students what to think, not enforcing misunderstood words, not getting them to do their demos. The clay demos are like tiny when they're supposed to be big. All these individual points of absolute minutia, absolutely useless factoids of how to run a Scientology classroom standardly. This is all sort of ritualistic in a way. Now that I actually think about this, I was just doing this whole thing on the occult, and magic, the last 2 weeks on my show. So I'm kind of in that mode of thinking, and this is a bit ritualistic because there's literally a checklist called the What is a Course checklist. It's based off the policy called What is a Course, and Hubbard lays out paragraph by paragraph all the different things that make up a standard Scientology course room: materials, supervisor, word clear, dictionaries in use, et cetera, et cetera. You have a checklist and you go and do an inspection of your course room against this checklist, or somebody comes in and does it on you. Or to you, like the ethics officer, the flag rep, the qualsec. I mean, there's different reasons people will come in and get up your, pipe about the standardness of your course room. But that's the magical ritual to get the statistics up in the classroom, regardless of what the reg is doing or what the Division 6 public guys are doing to bring new people in. None of that is your concern as a course room supervisor. You run a standard course room, your course room will be full. Period. And that's how I lived and died as a course room supervisor for years. It was all on me. And that didn't mean that I was supposed to go out and reg people or sell courses. That's not how that is interpreted. It's interpreted that you're a shit supervisor and you need correction and you need to run your course room standardly. And it needs to be tough and it needs to be rough and it needs to be hard and you need to be getting people through their courses. That's what it means.
So you mentioned being a standard course supervisor, and supposedly if you are standard, the room will fill up. It almost is reminding me of, it's making me think of a context where like Scientologists are giving word of mouth about the quality of your course room.
That's exactly what it's supposed to reflect. Exactly. Same with the Division 6 course room, the new public course room, right? Same drill. They're not as hard on the students as they are up in the area where I was. The Pro Academy course room is what it's called, the Academy. The new students, the guys who just sign up for their first or second courses, they're doing it down in the public division course room. And but the same standards apply for the supervisors. They're just kind of treating people with a little bit more kid gloves. But it's still, the standard tech of the course room is what fills the place up through good word of mouth and happy students re-signing onto their next course. They don't finish their course and leave. Mm-hmm. They immediately sign up for their next one, right? So you have the theory being you have this ever expanding kind of thing. And it's, it works just as well as the theory of multi-level marketing works. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it'll work. It's look, it's explained so beautifully here, and it's like, yeah, okay.
You got any stories as a course soup regarding your stats or no? Anything memorable?
Nah, not really. I mean, Nothing stands out in terms of like, oh wow, this is really going to impress people. It was a lot of grind. I mean, that's what being a staff member is. It's a lot of grind and a lot of useless attention and stress and anxiety over these kinds of points. I'm standing there, more anxious about, whether I've got the right dictionaries in my closet, in my dictionary closet in the course room, than I am, in the students in front of me. But then I, work really, really hard to get the students moving. But then you're interfering with them. You can get in their way, right? In an effort to try to make it standard and make sure they're doing well and check in with them, every fucking 10 minutes. And after a while, they're like, will you leave me alone? And you're supposed to go and give students spot checks and meter checks and do all these things as a supervisor, to the point where we checklisted all of that out, so that if you didn't give every student a spot check or a meter check every course period, you were off the rails. It became this very rote activity. It wasn't a dynamic working with the students kind of thing. Although we knew as the supervisors that that's what it should be and what it really at its heart was. If you wanted students to get through courses, you had to teach them, and you learned how to do that. And Hubbard's stuff is sort of a framework for that, but it doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work well, and it doesn't always do the job you need it to do. So you figure out all the ways you need to get around it or sidestep it. You know where all the articles are in the encyclopedia set to clarify all the different things Hubbard refers to in the different lectures your students are going to listen to. He's going to talk about butterfly lighting. He's going to talk about that, right? And you're going to be like, what the fuck is butterfly lighting? You're going to have a tab in the encyclopedia ready for that, because you don't want this guy sitting in a dictionary all day buried in photography terms. You don't want that. Mm-hmm. So you have the exact right place where this guy needs to see, oh, here it is. Here's a picture. Boom, we're done. And he doesn't spend 5 hours learning how to be a National Geographic photographer, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of thing is what I mean. You learn all this stuff. And funny, that some tools came out through the golden age of tech stuff that actually would make a supervisor's job easier with some of this stuff, like the student hat glossary, for example, right? We didn't have that back when I was a supervisor. And so we had to have those encyclopedias and reference books and everything kind of all ready. Or we would know to the fucking paragraph where certain obscure references were. And a certain question would come up about floating needles, or about doing assessments on the e-meter and special terminology that your notations that you use when you're doing assessments. I don't want to get all technical, but there's different things you write down when you're using an e-meter. Mm-hmm. You're not just making notes of what the person says, you're noting down what the e-meter is doing.
Yeah, you're noting down like the tone arm and all that.
Yeah, tone arm, the time, the reads on the e-meter, and there's like 26 of them, that you could, different ones. So you got to know how to write all this stuff down and do it pretty much without even looking at the paper. And after a while, you kind of acquire that skill. But there were certain obscure references connected with this activity that would be buried in some 1969 bulletin that nobody ever looks at. It's not on any course check sheet, but it exists. It's a bulletin Hubbard wrote. So you know about that bulletin, and to send people, okay, Tech Volume 5, page 369, paragraph 3. Just go read it and you'll understand this, right? And they go, oh, okay, and off they go. And I would have about 20 or 30 of those in my, in my hip pocket as a course supervisor to just deal with student questions and stuff that would come up. It wasn't always just find your word. Mm-hmm. We weren't that stupid about it.
That's originally how I interpreted it.
Senior people, executive people who didn't really know the actuality of teaching people Scientology, because it is kind of a skill. They only know what the policy says or what the bulletins say. And this is, again, the difference between what it says versus the real world of it. So they'll come in with these checklists and these rote ideas that you have to have every student get spot checked. there's a policy letter. It's called spot checks. It tells the supervisor how to do a spot check on a student. But it doesn't say in there that every single student is supposed to be spot checked every single class period. It doesn't say that, but they enforce it. So you're not running a standard course room if every student isn't spot checked. And you're interfering with people just trying to get through their courses by stopping them when they're doing fine. And that is a violation of policy. So here's an order from your senior telling you to do something that you know is wrong, but he's your senior and he's going to give you all kinds of shit if you don't do it. And yet here's this policy from Hubbard saying don't do that. So this is a very stupid example, I'm sure, but one that sort of demonstrates the sort of like ping-ponging that you have to do as a Scientology staff member all the time.
So sometimes by being standard, you're sabotaging yourself.
Yeah, and vice versa. Absolutely. Yeah, it's especially when it came to the technical stuff, right? Because you got to be trained. You got to do all this special classwork and training just to do the job of being a supervisor or being a word clearer.
I'd be like, so if say, because every student's working on their own course, what kind of training did you need on each student's materials in order to properly guide them to correct things?
See, that's the whole point, is you don't get any of that. L. Ron Hubbard is crystal clear in a policy letter called What is a Course High Crime? Okay, there's a policy letter called What is a Course? Mm-hmm. As I described, it lays out all the things that need to be in the course room: tables, chairs, dolls for the students to work with and their drilling, a supervisor, a word clearer, like all this stuff. I mean, at one point I practically had that fucking thing memorized. Then there's this other policy letter called What is a Course High Crime, where it specifically says if you're fucking around with this list of what is a course and you're offering classwork in Scientology organizations and you're not complying with that policy letter, you're committing a high crime. And if the course room supervisor thinks his job is to explain the materials to the student and not use study tech and only study tech, he is committing a high crime, or she is committing a high crime. Period, end of story. And it's listed in the high crimes. If you look it up in the ethics book, supervisors not following or demanding or enforcing what is a course. Add the policy letter. So, or WIAC, W-I-A-C, right? WIAC. The WIAC. Oh my God, man. My whole world revolved around WIAC for a very, very long time. At the supervisor level and then at the management level. So I've seen every in and out of this thing you can have. And so the reality, looking back on the whole silly and the goofiness of it, is that the supervisors are trained in study tech. You are trained within an inch of your life on misunderstood words, all the phenomena, all the different ways words can be misunderstood. There's 10 different ways. All the different variations of misunderstood words and the effect it has on someone. Because there's all this physiological stuff that Hubbard says, like you've fallen asleep in the classroom or you can't remember what you just read. Well, that indicates a misunderstood word. Period, end of story. There's no argument about it. We're going to find your MU. So this kind of stuff is what you're trained on, but it's more the interning or the real world. It's like medical school, and then there's the interning where you hit the emergency room. Mm-hmm. And then things get real. And that's what happens when you hit the floor as a course room supervisor. That's what we called it, right? You're on the floor of the course room, right? And you're supervising. Yeah. And here comes a student, and he's got a question, or she has a concern, or some kind of disagreement. And now it's time to figure out what's actually going on in front of you. Is it a misunderstood word? You also have other tech that it could be. There's false data. There's crashing misunderstood words. There's misunderstood words, but then there's also skipped gradients, and then there's also lack of mass. You're given these three things, not just the misunderstood word thing, and you're supposed to sort of triage this right there on the spot with the student, figure out what's going on, because they're not going to always know what's going on, and solve it, work it with them and get it figured out. And so this is what you kind of come to learn, is you not only learn the methodology, but because you're so used to this body of students who tend to be, the people who keep coming around, you just kind of learn them,
Mm-hmm.
and you learn what they need to learn. And Hubbard's not always easy to learn. Hubbard has some obscure shit, and his writing sucks. But we didn't think about it that way when we were in. We thought we were the stupid idiots who just couldn't understand his greatness, right? So it's a whole different script when you're in. You're not thinking about his writing or his talking as a bunch of gobbledygook and nonsense. You're thinking it's, pearls of wisdom, right?
Workable.
So anyway, I'm going on and on and on about this, but
You're good. Stat binders. What is a stat binder?
Oh, okay. All right. So a stat binder is basically a 3-ring binder with statistics in it. Whether they're printed or hand drawn, and for a long time they were hand drawn at all levels of Scientology before we had printers. Oh boy, yeah. So that's what a stat binder is, just a collection of statistics, generally for a organization. I've not seen stat binders ever put together for divisions or for sections or something like that. It's always, the org stat book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's updated every week because the orgs report their statistics each week.
How long are they kept for?
Well, the stat binders are always there.12 just updated. So they have the way they were printed. You could set them up pretty much any way, but mostly the graphs were kept for 12 to 13 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Is how much the graph paper would go. And then when you start a new piece of graph paper, you plot 3 weeks and then, keep it going for 10, right? And then flip it again, 3 weeks. And that's kind of how the stat binders were kept. And this was a management thing. The org statistics are displayed on a bulletin board at the org level. It's called the Org Information Center, or OIC. And I guess this is taken by Hubbard from the Combat Information Center of the military. And so you have this Org Information Center where all the statistics of all the graphs of all the orgs, major statistics are posted. And I think it ends up being something like the major statistics. What is it? It's like 26 graphs or something like that.
And then the minor statistics make up the other 100.
Kind of guessing there. It's like 3 per division plus a couple others as major statistics. So you might have anywhere from 26 to, what do you got? You got 7 divisions, but it's actually 9. Times 3 is 27. 28, yeah, 27 to 30 stats on the board, right?
Okay.
And that's your OIC. And you should be able to, at the org level, you go look at the OIC and you can literally, they're all the statistics laid out right there. And if they are plotted correctly and you can just look at one to the other, you can kind of compare what's up with the org. The stat binder at the management level duplicates the OIC. It's all just printed in a book.
Mm.
In order to, stat graphs at management level they exist. They're there, whether they're on a computer or whether they're in a stat binder that's real. They're, like in a real world thing. Mm-hmm. You have access to the statistics, and the statistics are a key part of how Scientology manages its churches. It doesn't look at happy success stories coming out of the org. Nobody at management really cares that much about that. Nobody's looking at that. Nobody's looking at happy customers. That's assumed. It's just assumed. And and success stories, number of successes that are actually written down each week, that is one of the statistics. So we can see numerically how many happy customers there are, right? So again, it's all just kind of...
That's why they force people to write them.
Well, look, happy customers, all right? Don't be bad-mouthing the success stories. Nobody's forcing anybody to do anything in Scientology. No, come on.
No, but you can't go to your next course until you write your success story and get it fucking inspected by who?
But that doesn't mean everybody writes a success story. Some people are just like, yeah, no, I ain't got nothing to write.
And they allow
And
it.
if you get a completion without a success story, you don't have a completion. So you got to deal with that. right? You're going to have to fix that person because they're not happy, or at least not happy enough to want to write a success. And not everybody does. So you can strong arm somebody, but if they don't want to, they're not gonna. And I saw that happen a number of times. And then we had to go and find out what was what. You know, sometimes you kind of cajole them into it and they'll go, okay, fine, whatever. But sometimes, I ain't, no.
So what happened with
No.
those stubborn cases?
Oh, you fix them. You do some kind of repair session or something, and you make them happy, get the needle floating, you know, again, induce some euphoria through the standard practice of, you know, auditing, which is covert hypnotism, and piles and piles of suggestion and social proof and all kinds of other methods of influence to get the person around to being happy. And when they're happy, okay, I'll write a success story, right? And off they go. You know, it's generally speaking, unless somebody's really sour for some reason, in which you're going to have to dig into their life and find out why the hell they're so sour. You know, a lot of people just kind of come around after a session or whatever and get fixed, especially if it's on the org's dime, which sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. Depends on the circumstances.
I was about to say, that's
Most of the time they have
surprising
to pay
to
for
hear
it.
on the org's dime.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Okay.
The org has to do its own review. I mean, if somebody red tags after a session, you know, sometimes they'll get a repair, and if they're out of hours, you know, they're going to get that repair anyway, because they can't just have the red tag. They can't have the guy just leave and go 24 hours without the needle floating, right? That whole thing.
Can you work their red
That's
tag?
a whole different. That's a red tag. Yeah, that's a whole different thing. But statistics will get penalized if a red tag, okay. That's a situation where the whole org statistic can get nullified. Mm-hmm. If you let somebody go over on the red tag 24-hour rule, you got to fix it, and you have 24 hours to do it. So I'm just kind of spewing this random stuff. So if somebody comes and is going to go through their class and they're going to finish it, they go on an e-meter and they get checked. Are you happy with the class? You know, they're asked a couple of questions, and if their needle is not floating on the e-meter doing this kind of a motion, and they're not happy with the service and beaming and wanting to write a success story about how happy they are about this class, then you've got a problem and you got to fix it. And you have, you know, now that's not a red tag though. That's just a problem you got to fix. And you got to fix it quick. And that's going to require a review of some kind or correction of some kind, because clearly the guy didn't get something if he's all sour at the end of his class.
Yeah.
But for auditing, if you come out of an auditing session, you go to an examiner. Again, somebody else is putting you on an e-meter and checking your needle. And that's all they're doing. They're not talking to you. They're just looking at your needle. And you just sit there. And you can say whatever you want. And this is the exam that you get following every auditing session that's delivered in an org. So you go to the examiner, and if your needle is not floating, this is called a red piece of paper with the time and date of your no FN, your failure to FN, is put on your pre-clear folder. That the auditor just brought you out of session. He's got your folder. The red tag is put on the folder prominently with the date and time noted. And the org has 24 hours to get that tag off of that folder, which means they have to produce a floating needle in this guy at another exam. Now he can go right back in and say whatever he wants to say, and maybe his needle floats at that point, and then, you know, the red tag is probably lifted. But if he's pissy or sour or upset or mad about his session, and this does happen, the red tag stays on, and the org has to get him back in session. Usually it's supposed to be immediately. All right, come with me. We're going right back in. And the auditor has to fix it. And there are actions the auditor can do called correction lists to fix it. And that's supposed to get the needle floating again and get it down to the examiner, and the examiner can see the needle is floating, right? And this is sort of the quality control check that the org has built into its system, systematically, to make sure that auditors get the result they're supposed to get, is somebody else checks them by putting the person on the e-meter. And this is called the exam. That's why it's called an exam. Mm-hmm. And that's the red tag. And like I said, you got 24 hours. Let's say it's 10 o'clock at night and the guy's, just not FNing. And you can't take him back in session. He's tired. He's hungry. It's 10 o'clock. You got to schedule him for as soon as possible the next day. And if the guy has to go to work, you might have to wait until like 5 or 6 o'clock for him to show up. And you're praying the entire day that this guy is having a good day at work. This isn't the day he gets fired or some shit, right?
No BBIs.
Because you got to get that FN and you got 24 hours to get it. Now, most of the time, the org gets really heavy-handed about this and absolutely insists that the guy comes in the following morning, first thing. And if the auditor is a nighttime auditor, he's got to come in during the day. You taking a day off work, buddy. This is your pre-clear, and he's red tagged, and you're dealing with it, right? Mm-hmm. You're taking responsibility for it. So, they got to get the guy back in session or the woman back in session and get that red tag off. And if they don't, the entire, if I remember this right, and you can look this up, I believe it's in the policies that you have. The penalty is like the entire Division 5, mm-hmm. which is the division responsible for org correction. I think they lose their entire statistics for like every day that this red tag is not dealt with.
Hang on.
And the org's major statistic of paid completions, which I mentioned earlier, is zeroed out every day that you have red tags going over. So you don't ever want red tags going over because it's basically like nobody showed up to work that day, statistically speaking, right? And you can have crashes in statistics because of this red tag thing. I've seen it. I've seen red tags go on for 2 or 3 days, and people are just, they got dark circles under their eyes by that point. It's just been sleepless nights and frantic, trying to deal with getting this person to FN, right? And more than once, I saw people just give up. It's after 5 or 6 days, they were just like, fuck it, we're not going to keep penalizing ourselves for this. And they stopped taking the penalty, and management was like, okay, all right, it's just for that week. We're not going to let it roll over, right? Even though per policy, that's exactly what they were supposed to do. So it's all fun and games in there, but that's the whole red tag thing.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the reasons for red tags. So like you mentioned, no FN at exams, roller coaster bad exam report, PC ill within a few days of any major case action. But
yep. Oh yeah, you'll have people who will have a session and then they'll come back in a few hours later. I don't feel so good. I was feeling great. Now I don't. Needle's all dirty and shit. Okay. Red tag. Get you back in session. Get it fixed. That's generally, again, people will generally be paying for their repair sessions, by the way. It's very rarely is it on the org. But mostly that happens when you're recovering people. The org will end up paying for, we'll give a person a 1 or 2, even 3 I've seen sessions for free. Mm-hmm. But you got to be pretty desperate to get a person back to give them 3 free sessions. That's a lot for Scientology. That's very generous of the org to be doing that. Oh yeah, so I wanted to talk about the general framework of this.
Yes.
Because that might help contextualize some of the questions.
Okay.
Because we were going to talk about org management, mm-hmm. right?
Yes.
Okay. So all the stuff about statistics and lines and condition formulas and all that stuff is kind of org level stuff that happens in every Scientology organization for staff members. They have statistics and they have to keep them and they live or die by them. The assumption being that, you get your statistic up, no matter how you do it, it's valid. Because it's built into the system that it has to be in order for it to be a valid statistic. It can't be false, And if you're false reporting your statistics, that you're claiming that you're producing products that don't exist, eventually, you'll probably be found out.
Yeah.
Because people look at these statistics, they look very closely at them, and sometimes they are the basis of full-on investigations into people. And they'll go back and audit your statistics. They'll verify, or they'll do like forensic statistics on you. I've had to do those, especially at LA Org, where they would false report all the goddamn time. The management exists separate from the orgs. They're not in the orgs. They're not there on the ground. They're not getting, live video transmissions from the orgs. They're where they're located, like in Los Angeles, or in East US, they're in New York. They're sometimes close by to other Sea Org advanced organizations or St. Hill level organizations, like in LA. You have Big Blue, and that's a collection of different organizations. The management organization is only one of them. Management isn't supposed to be involved in the day-to-day running of the orgs, but they are, because of the pressure and the way that the system is kind of run on such a short leash. Everybody's on a real tight, almost daily leash, even at the management level, where Hubbard says that's really bad idea and don't do that, don't run things that way. People do anyway, right? And again, mostly it centers around income and income demand. And there's an incredible amount of income demand in Scientology all the time. They're always want the money. That gets in the way of the actual calm, rational running of the system that I'm describing. Everything is dialed up to 11 because it all focuses around the money, and they're never, ever making enough money. And so if they're not making enough money, then, okay, so we'll get to the analysis part. So all the orgs keep all these statistics and report them up every week. We at management would look at the statistics that applied to our jobs and see how the orgs were doing. I was over delivery, so I was watching the classroom statistics and the auditing statistics. But there was somebody who sat right next to me who was over the income and dissemination division. I was over Div 4, they were over Div 2. So income was their baby. And that person and me might have a lot of discussions about income and delivery at the continental level. What do we need to do to get more income? Well, we need to get more delivery going. Okay, what do we need to do? Sell more classes. Well, we got to get more regs. It was this back and forth of trying to work together to figure out how to get these statistics up. The stats come rolling in and they are analyzed. And that means that we would look at them on a 3-week trend. The org staff are only looking at them week to week. We're paying attention 3 weeks. So we look at all the statistics, assign them a condition based on 3-week trend, determine our own personal statistics based on the total of what was delivered or what was made in money, right, for that other guy. Those were our statistics. How many student points total for the entire continental area? And if 1 or 2 big organizations had a really bad week, they could nullify all the success of 10 other small, tiny little churches, right? If you have Albuquerque producing 30,000 student points a week, and 1 week they rocket, they're generally running around 30,000 a week, and suddenly they have this spectacular week and rocket to 60,000. For them, that's out the roof. Meanwhile, Stevens Creek, which is this huge church in the Bay Area, they're running about 200,000 student points a week. They have a bad week, crash to 125,000. They nullify all of Albuquerque's gain, plus nullify Las Vegas and Twin Cities all at once. So big orgs have an undue influence on the statistical volume of what's going on, right? We're totaling all of it together and sort of, okay, we don't produce an average, we take the total. That's my statistic for delivery, is total auditing hours, total student points, and various sub-statistics like number of completed courses or number of completed intensives of auditing. These are sub-statistics that we would also be keeping track of.
Mm-hmm.
Auditing delivery goes up, but intensives completed doesn't go up. Well, that means that there's a lot more non-intensive auditing going on. And that's a problem because auditing is supposed to be delivered intensively. It's supposed to be delivered so that you get 12 and a half hours in a week. And a public person gets auditing and they come into the church and they're not supposed to be coming in 1 or 2 days a week for their auditing. They're supposed to be coming in, 12 and a half hours a week and get that intensive done. And if you're scheduling poorly so that your people who are getting auditing, your pre-clears, are only coming in 1 or 2 nights a week, they're not getting intensive auditing. Hubbard says that's bad. That's wrong. They won't get the gains out of their auditing that they're supposed to. So this is actually monitored, and something that's really important in Scientology delivery is getting intensive auditing, not just a lot of hours, but delivered quickly. So you can have a graph of auditing hours and it can go way up, but if the INCO, the intensives completed graph, is level or down, those hours of going up are actually a problem. And that's a statistical analysis point. It is a good thing hours are going up, but it's not as good as it could be because we're not getting the intensive delivery.
Yeah.
We got to get that going, right?
So you could be getting people who are halfway through their intensives. Those hours are going up, but you're not getting the fully completed intensive.
That's right. And you can't sell more auditing until they complete the, you could, but
Well, yeah.
the people aren't incentivized to buy more auditing until they complete the auditing package that they bought.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're dragging it out for a month to get through 12 hours of auditing, they're really not getting the results of auditing. And if you stop for a second and reframe that into what auditing really is, right? They're not getting enough jolt to keep them under control. They're not getting enough hit
They're not
to get
impinging hard
addicted.
enough.
They're not getting enough hit to get the euphoria that'll keep them coming back for more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are requirements to make this work on people over time. And cult involvement has an awful lot to do with how much time you're spending with the cult and immersed in the world of the cult. And that's the real reason why intensives completed is so important. But we didn't think about it that way. We thought about it in terms of auditing gives you gains, but you have to get a lot of it in as short a period of time as possible because that's what Hubbard said to do. And we went, oh, okay, well, I guess that's what we got to do. And we didn't really think about it in terms of mind control. But this is what it reinforces. And this is how if you get what I'm saying, then this is how the system of Scientology reinforces itself and reinforces the mind control aspect of it is it demands through its statistics and its management, it demands people come in more and more and more and be more and more and more committed, which forces the staff who are in contact with the public to get really imaginative and really creative about reasons that they can make for those people to come into the org as often as possible. Events, parties, seminars, workshops, anything to get people in as much as possible. This is a key kind of part of Scientology and why it's so pressury, or has been. It has been known to be. This is what drives it. Is this whole engine of the management and the statistics and stuff. It's kind of funny. Okay, so the basis of Scientology management lies in 3 things: statistics, data files, and analyses, evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
Right, those things are the basic components of, and programs. Sorry, programs. So those are your basic components of Scientology management, right? The statistics are a key part, but they are not everything there is to know about how Scientology runs its orgs. The statistics are what are used to judge and measure raw production. Okay, so anyway, so you have the statistics come in.
Yeah.
The other, and you can do your analysis. You compare the statistics one to the other, and you see, here's how Hubbard put it. And it really does kind of work out this way within this little system of what I did for many, many years. Okay, so the statistics tell you what's happening in the organization as a whole. And sometimes it tells you things that are happening that even the people on the ground don't necessarily think about or are necessarily thinking about or aware of, right? Like the example I gave with the hours and the intensives completed. These are two of like 100 and something statistics that an org keeps. So not everybody in the org is looking at all the graphs. People have their thing that they're focused on.
Yeah.
And you can see everything. You see the book sales. You see the number of people walking in for the first time. You see introductory services like OCA tests or films or watch this video or whatever. That's all statusized. People, they keep track of that stuff, and that's reported in the statistics. So I can see how many folks walked in. I can see how many books were sold to them. I can see how many people signed up for a new course for the first time. I can see how many people were in the building on paid services as a whole. And you compare this week to week to week, and you can see if an org is actually getting more people in and how it's getting people in. Is it book sales that are going up at the same rate that the bodies are going up? Or is it, intro services? Or is it these other statistics over here called the FSM statistics, where current Scientologists are bringing their friends or family in? That's their numerical values to show me that. And there are numbers for delivery. And theoretically, for example, when I see new people coming in through the intro services, and that's going up, 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 that should predict that in about 2 or 3 months, the Division 4 statistics should be going up, because those people should convert over into major service buyers. And so if I'm seeing spikes in Division 6 statistics, then I better see spikes in Division 2 and Division 4 statistics in a few weeks or months.
Otherwise, they're not able to keep people on course.
Exactly. And in a long-term analysis, that will show up just in the numbers. You'll see spikes in new people, and then it kind of doesn't go anywhere. And it never shows up over in Div 4 or Div 2 with the income and the major delivery. And so therefore, that they're losing people. They're not re-signing them, or they're not completing them on services. And you can go deeper into the statistics and see which it is, because re-sign to major services is a statistic.
Jesus Christ,
how many
talk
people
about
went from...
bureaucracy.
Well, there's a lot of numbers here, but they actually do communicate a picture of the production of the organization. They do. Yeah. And I could tell what was going on in the org, but I didn't know why. Numbers only tell you what. And you have to, unless you're telepathic or psychic or something, you can't tell why the numbers went up. You just know that they did. Did they add more staff? Was it somebody getting industrious that week? Did they get some volunteers in to help? What changed that the statistics went up or are going up on a trend? Something did. Something's causing that to happen. And you really want to get curious and find out, because the whole point of the activity is to get the numbers to go up. So the way you find out what happened is the data files. And the data files are a collection of folders, actual file folders in file cabinets that are kept by month for every single individual Church of Scientology. And there are international data files, and then there are continental data files. So we had access at the West US to the data files for the West US orgs. So St. Louis to Hawaii and everything in between, we had folders every month of every year that org ever existed. We could go back in those data files. Theoretically, we really only could go back a couple of years. And because they archive this shit in warehouses, right? And it wasn't all digitized. It was digitized on microfiche. It wasn't like in a computer. And using that microfiche reader was a fucking pain in the ass. So we didn't really have full access. We kind of did. The microfiches were there, but you had to be a man on a mission to really want to dig into the microfiche data files. So anyway, we have these data files, and what they are is it's a collection of literally everything that comes up from that org that month. You want to know what happened you're doing a statistical analysis, and you see that Albuquerque is just killing it on the book sales. They're just suddenly, week after week after week, they're making bank on new books being sold. And you don't know why. Could be a number of different reasons. I threw out a few just a few minutes ago, right? Volunteers or this or that or the other thing. So all you know is that something is happening there. And it's been going on for a little while. So you go to the data files, because data has been coming from the org every week. Not only do they send statistics, but they also send reports from the staff members and sometimes from the public. Then all the knowledge reports that get written in the org, copies of those get sent up to management, and they go into these data files, and we have access to them. Copies of staff member reports. So every week, staff are supposed to fill out a weekly report. There's a lot of bureaucracy. It's not always followed. Some orgs, especially the smaller they get, the tougher they struggle with this stuff, and we don't get weekly reports from them. We get hardly anything. Their data files are like little thin little files. The big orgs that have, you know, everything, they could have these really big, thick data files, and you know, where every month is really packed with information. A copy of the org magazine is supposed to be in there. Like everything about that org is supposed to be in those data files, so that you could go and pull whatever file you need from whatever month or series of months. Maybe you're looking at a really long-term thing, and you start flipping through them, and you just go through the data files and you look for stuff that's relevant to what you're looking for. You don't really care that much about the income stuff if you're looking for new public in. Those two things are not, that's not what you're looking for, right? You want to know about these book sales. So you're gonna go look for the reports from the booksellers or from the public officer, or, you know, you're gonna look for any knowledge reports or any other reports or commendations, or they're gonna tell you what's going on with these books, who's selling all the books, and how are they doing it. That's what you want to get the answer to. And the numbers can't tell you that. The data tells you that. So these two things go together to give you the picture of what happened in the org and why it happened. And my job and all the managers' jobs were to get those answers to those questions for every org which had a spike or a crash. And we focused on the crashes more than we focused on the spikes, because the crashes were really bad, right? If people are crashing, their statistics are going down, you want to fix that right away. So that's where most of your attention goes. And all of this happens on Thursday night. So all the statistics come in from all the orgs. You get the updated stats. You go through every one of them for the different orgs. I would be going through my delivery statistics, for example. I'd look at Albuquerque's, I'd look at Austin Day, Austin Foundation. You know, I would go to Denver. Yeah, you just go through them in alphabetical order, right? Los Gatos, and, you know, then et cetera, et cetera. I'm only looking at the delivery stats, but when they crash, or where they might be crashed, I got to find out why. Because that's my statistic. Right? If the student points have gone down across the entire continent, I got a problem. But generally speaking, if they go down, for me, it's usually 2 or 3 orgs that have had really bad weeks, and I got to find out what's going on. I'm supposed to be paying attention to 3-week trends, But sometimes you'll get such a crash that it'll just crash whatever trend was going on, right? You're going along fine and suddenly boom, right? Well, your trend is fucked. So that's obviously an org you need to deal with. You look at, then I get curious about the entire organization. Let's say Denver. Let's say Denver crashes their student points one week, or over a period of time, their student points are just not going anywhere. And I got to figure out why. I can see what's happening. The data files tell me that the supervisor's been sick, off post, and that public have been coming in and volunteering to supervise the classroom. Right? What? What the hell is going on? Nobody alerted me to this, right?
Yeah.
And you got 34 orgs under you, and every week you got to do this drill with every crash. And there'd be, like I said, there'd be 2 or 3, 4 of them, right? So you got to come up with a plan, right? Like, okay, so I have a few hours. On Thursday at 2 o'clock, the stats start rolling in. By dinner time, we've got them all. By 9 o'clock, we're having our first meeting breaking down what's going on in the continent, right? Overall. So we're looking at our total statistics, income, delivery, new public in, like all the different divisions, and the organization as a whole. There's these different things going on at management where the divisional staff, like me, who are only focused on one division, we're doing our thing, but there's these other guys who work with us and work in the same office as us called programs chiefs. Which brings us to the third thing that we utilize to manage organizations. You got stats,
Programs.
data files, and you got programs.
Okay.
Okay, and you have programs chiefs. That's their job title. Is a programs chief. They are the ones who are actually quarterbacking the orgs from the management level. We're just aides. We are assistants. We're people who are looking hard at and specialized on one division or one kind of activity that the orgs are working on. But the orgs are doing lots of different things. And so we're only kind of hyper-focused on one area. The programs chief is looking at the bigger picture. So they're kind of the quarterback for the orgs.
They're getting the data from you and creating their plans to implement.
Correct. We contribute. They look at the whole picture of the org. So when the stats come rolling in for them on Thursday, they're not just looking at income or delivery or new public in. They're looking at all of it. And the overall statistic I mentioned earlier is paid completions, which is a point system based on the value of the different services that are completed in a Church of Scientology each week. Major services are heavily weighted. Auditing services are less than training services. Orgs are supposed to be delivering a lot of training. And the statistics kind of push this. You get more for your student completions in points than you get for your auditing completions. But you get more for your auditing completions than you get for your new public service completions. Those don't make as much because they're easier to deliver and they don't cost as much. So the paid completion statistic is this kind of complicated point system, which gives you a number and you compare it week by week by week and see if they're going, up, down, or sideways. And that's the one statistic that reflects the overall health of the organization. Okay, so the programs chief is looking at the PDC, paid completions, and the various statistics that contribute to it. And we talked about how on Thursday the orgs have different meetings. The executives of each org meet up and plan their next week. That planning is all put together into what's called an org battle plan. And it's the list of things that are going to get done in this next week in the org that the executive director puts together as their to-do list, you could say, for the next week. That list, that battle plan, is sent up to management, to the programs chief. And they're the ones quarterbacking the org, so they have to approve or reject the battle plan from the org. Very, very rarely did they reject it. And for a period of time, they were told, you can't reject it. You're not supposed to be running the orgs that closely, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is the kind of thing that would go in and out. So the programs chief is called a programs chief because the way they run and quarterback the org is through running programs. Not computer programs, but similar. It's a series of steps that are supposed to get done that are generic kind of steps mostly. They're just kind of a generalized program to accomplish a specific task or purpose. And there are many programs running in orgs at any one time.
Mm-hmm.
There could be an income program. And that program would mainly run in Division 2, but it might have things to other staff outside of the income producing staff. Maybe there's other steps that need to get done by other parts of the organization. Maybe Treasury has some stuff that needs to get done, or, the Div 6 guys, or, right?
Yeah.
The income program is how the programs chief tells the orgs under him or her how to make income. The programs chief doesn't just dream up on his own what to tell the org to do. The programs chief is supposed to use the programs that they have to tell the org what to do, right? Instead of saying, I want you to get 10 new people in this week because I know off the top of my head that that's what should be happening. Instead, the programs chief will have a program for the income of the org, and maybe that week they really need to handle the income. Mm-hmm. So they'll pull out the program handling the income, and they'll go, I want target 1, 2, 3, and 4 done this week.
Okay.
And targets 1, 2, 3, and 4 involve hiring a new reg, getting them on the job, and getting them making some money this week.
Yeah.
Those are targets 1, 2, and 3 on the income program. Kind of obvious targets, but you literally spell it out for the staff. And you say, I want target 1, 2, and 3 done this week. Or maybe they've already done that 3 weeks ago. You don't just keep hitting them with it. You then go, I want targets 4, 5, and 6 done because we got 1, 2, and 3 done last week. We don't have to keep redoing them. Let's do 4, 5, and 6 this week. They involve getting a letter registrar on post, or getting, packages being sold, or whatever the targets are. When you complete the whole program, all the steps, maybe it's 20 targets, and it takes you 4 or 5 weeks or months or years pushing and pushing and pushing to get this program done. But it's assumed that by the time you finish it, and it does have an expected time frame in which it's supposed to get done, which usually involves a couple weeks or months. It's assumed that by finishing the program, you will be creating expansion.
Does this have to do with...
You're getting more staff.
Yeah.
You're getting them productive. These kinds of steps. How could you help but expand the organization if you do these things?
Mm-hmm. This
pretty common.
Just something I learned this past week. Does this have to do with the time machine basket? Okay.
Yes. Program targets are assigned completion dates. Okay. So the programs chief is running the organizations, monitoring their statistics, and I'll say quarterbacking. I'll keep referring to that. I'll keep using that term. It's not a term they use in management, but it's kind of what the role of the programs chief is. The programs chief is supposed to strategize where the orgs are going and get the programs done. We didn't write the programs. The upper level guys at Miscavige's level, at the international management level, those are the guys who write the programs. They're supposed to be the experts of all experts when it comes to running Scientology. And they would write these generalized programs like an income program or a course room program. It would be a generalized kind of thing. Every org is supposed to do this. Get a supervisor, get a word clearer, get 20 students in the classroom, right? Like do all these different steps. Make sure you got all the dictionaries. That's a program target. Get your dictionaries. And you could work on that for like 6 months, getting the income, making the, getting some money allocated to the course room, and buying those dictionaries and putting them on the shelf. And now we got that target done of we got all the dictionaries we're supposed to have. That's a completely legitimate program target that I would push all the time until it was done. And by getting all these targets in or done and keeping them going, you're supposed to expand the organization. This is the theory. Sounds like it makes sense.
Theory.
Yeah, it does make sense, but it's not done in such a way that it results in the expansion that they believe that it will.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because there are too many programs being run into the orgs at any one time. The staff, Hubbard even commented on this. He was no organizational genius. When I say things like even Hubbard commented on this, I don't, or even Hubbard talked about this, I don't mean that like Hubbard was this, genius person for putting this whole thing together. This is this whole system I'm talking about, the data files, the statistics, the analysis, programs. Hubbard did not invent even half of this stuff. This came from other people around him who had ideas over time as to how to put management together for Scientology.
I'm sure Mary Sue was a big contributor.
Yeah, it evolved over years.
Mm-hmm.
This system did. It didn't all start one day, boom, we're doing this. It evolved over time. And through the 1970s, there was a lot more craziness than what I'm describing in how Scientology churches were run.
How so?
A lot more craziness. I'm just kind of laying out some frameworks here of how it's kind of supposed to work,
mm-hmm.
right? So the programs are really important. And I had programs that I was running to the Divisional 4 staff. The programs chief has their master programs that they're kind of running in the org. And then you have custom-made programs for orgs, which are called org evals or evaluations. And that's kind of a subgenre of the programs thing. So it's kind of it's still in this third component of management, right? Yeah, it's kind of org evals. And there came a point where Miscavige just did away with this. Org evals really aren't a thing anymore. At least they weren't when I left. And I don't think he's revived them in the last 10 years. There's a whole episode we could do just on org evals. So I don't know that we need to go into it a whole lot more than just for me to say right now. But they are custom made or custom written programs for a single organization to solve a single thing or situation for that org, that it is, and it's based on statistical analysis and a lot of study of the org. And it's done by somebody who is not even in management. The org eval was supposed to be done by somebody kind of external to the whole thing and kind of objective and not involved in the whole management of it. Mm-hmm. So they can have just an ivory tower look at the org and even evaluate how the management of the org is doing, right? Because sometimes management, is causing statistics to go down with their dumbass orders. So you could have evaluations done at multiple levels of Scientology as well. But the point is that they are custom written, tailor-made programs. And the programs chief is given the eval and get the eval done. And when an org has an eval, it is the highest priority program. Everything else takes a back seat to getting the eval done. The truth of the matter is that all the generic programs are bullshit, and the org should only have an org eval, and that's the only thing they should be run on. And that was originally kind of the concept, but then it dispersed, and in the 80s they created this kind of international management executive committee and a whole host of people who could basically tell orgs what to do.
Yeah.
And as a result, orgs got told to do 50 different things all at once.
Constant bypass.
And this was, oh my God. And this was management all through the 70s, but it got on steroids in the 80s. And this was all sort of really, in a sort of macro look at it, it was it was Miscavige tightening the reins of power and control even harder, right? I must have more control over these organizations, right?
Yeah.
Because look what they'll get up to when we give them free reign, right? Like the 70s and the Mission Network and all that, right? Look what those people get up to. So, yeah. Okay, so you have the programs and the evals. And then the fourth component of management is the networks. And this is actual people. So what Hubbard set up in the early 70s was a way to put eyes and ears on the ground at the org level for management. It's not enough that management gets statistics, figures out what's going on, figures out why, and tells the org what to do to fix or remedy that when the stats are down. That system all by itself assumes you have compliant staff members who listen to you.
And they're trying to be compliant. That's the thing, is they're trying to do what, or well, how much of what you say are they trying to do because they're being told other things to do?
Yeah, well, that's one reason why staff won't do what you tell them. There are many reasons staff won't do what you tell them. From they think you're full of shit and you are giving them orders that don't make any sense, to you're giving them the exact right orders and they just don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a whole spectrum in between. And I saw all of it over the years. I did this for like 8 or 9 years. And not everybody, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and like, toot my Scientology horn, but very few people did management as long as I did at the continental level. You get bounced around on jobs in the Sea Org all the time. Mm-hmm. And I didn't. I had a job that people wanted me to stay on because I got good at it. And good at it is a relative term because this system is so fucking insane that all I really mean when I say that is somehow I managed to keep my sanity through all of that.
Somehow you managed to keep a better grip on yourself than most people.
It was bad, man. It was bad. So, okay, so Hubbard knew, I mean, running things from a boat, mm-hmm. sailing around in the Mediterranean and off the coasts, right, of Europe.
Yeah.
Hubbard wasn't getting compliance to all his orders. Hubbard himself was managing churches in the early 70s. I mean, he was watching and running Scientology. And sometimes he would send orders down to orgs and they wouldn't get done. And he was like, what the fuck? So they set up what was called the Flag Representative Network. Hubbard's boat was in the Sea Org was called Flag. He was a flag officer. He's the guy in charge, the Commodore. In the Navy, the flagship is the one that has the guy in charge on it. Mm-hmm. And that's the flag ship. And there's literally a flag that shows that. And you fly that flag. And so the flag moves from ship to ship where the guy in charge is.
Yeah.
So this term Hubbard loved. And so Flag was the ship that Hubbard was on. And there were representatives sent out from this ship, Sea Org members, to each of the Scientology churches. And that's why they were called Flag Representatives, FRs. And to this day, this is a network that survives. That is how management runs the orgs. Is they have Sea Org members on the ground enforcing compliance. And they're not staff of they're a staff member of the org that they're in, but they're not under anybody in that org. They are at the same level of command as the executive director. Their orders have the same weight. And so they can run around in the org and demand staff do whatever they tell them to do, but the key is that the flag rep is not supposed to be cross-ordering the executive director because the flag rep is only ordering done the targets that the programs chief wants done.
But how
and the programs
often
chief is supposed
do those programs from the programs chiefs override what the ED says?
Well, see, that's one of the things often. because the programs don't always address, as generalized programs, they don't always address the specific problems that the orgs have and need to solve. Right? If you have a program target to get a reg on post this week, fine. Go tell the HCO guys, the hiring people, get a reg on post this week. If you have hiring people to even tell that to. A lot of orgs don't. But let's say you do, and you go issue that order as the ED, fine. I'm getting that program target done. But your real concern right now is that the street out front of the org doesn't exist because they're doing renovations. The city is renovating the entire front of the building street this week or this month, right? Because there's construction happening, and you ain't got no body traffic all of a sudden. You had people walking by your building. You were getting some books sold. You were bringing some people in, and all that's gone now. Yeah, your stats are going to crash like crazy. It's going to be goose eggs, right? Just zeros across the boards. And you got to solve that problem. You don't care about a reg right now. You got that problem to deal with. And that's the kind of unreality between management sitting in an ivory tower thousands of miles away telling the ED, get this program target done at all costs, no matter what. And the ED's going, well, yeah, I want to do that. I'd love to have a reg, but I got a little bit of another problem.
So there's no healthy back and forth between the two.
Well, there would be back and forth, and that's what the telex system and the communication system is all about, is the programs chief, hearing what's going on and repeating the order. Get it done. The programs chief doesn't care about the street out front. The programs chief wants that reg on post. Because in a longer term look than the street outside, getting another reg on post is the smart move to make more money.
Yeah. But if you don't have
the ED can't even see clear
money,
can't get any of that going if they can't get any people in, right? So it's the push-pull of the on-the-ground reality is what I'm trying to demonstrate, no matter what it is, right? A street thing, a staff member sick, a fucking pandemic, whatever is the thing that's happening at the ground level, the program's management people don't have to deal with any of that. I mean, shit, sometimes it could even be internal stuff that management's completely oblivious to until they get the reports and find out what the hell's going on.
Well, like
you just can't know. What's that?
What's that, like staff problems? So like if staff have knowledge reports out on each other?
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to say that no matter how tight they try to, tighten the leash, the guys hundreds or thousands of miles away can never know what's really going on at the org level day to day. Let's say the ED walks in one day and the supervisor is having an affair with one of the auditors. Right? And now this huge ethics blow up happens. And people are yelling at each other in the middle of the org, and the ethics officer has to go corral these two and stick them in separate rooms and deal with all of that. And they got, and maybe the auditor's spouse is your director of processing, right? So you can just kiss off any auditing getting done today because all these people are off in ethics. And your course room is shut down. Now you got to go find some supervisor because your soup is in ethics all day.
So one little
this is the kind of thing an ED has to deal with day to day.
So one little flap could cause an entire domino effect of a shitstorm.
Absolutely. You could have and that would be a huge flap for that week, right? That would be a tremendous emergency. 3 staff off post, right? It would be, telex is up to management. Dear sir, you're not going to believe this one, right? And here we go. And of course, they're not going to say you're not going to believe this one because they don't have that kind of casual communication system here. One thing I need to be clear on about the communications going up and down the lines on this is these are senior to junior command lines. They're not conversational lines. The programs chief is not buddy-buddy with the executive directors. It's a command line. They order these targets done, and they expect compliance. They're not there to, to be all buttery and warm with the staff. Neither was I over the Division 4 stuff. I didn't want to hear about their problems. I wanted them to be solving their problems so that they got their stats up, But you often, over time, became familiar with the staff and their problems and their personalities and their issues. You couldn't help it, especially if you were on post for a while. And you just kind of learned the people you were working with, and they eventually would eventually meet you or have some kind of conversation or something at some point. And, and so relationships would be established here, but the communications were always very much, get these targets done, and I don't want to hear any guff about it. And so the ED or the staff can't report back up the lines. Well, sir, the street's closed. Sorry. You can't give a communication like that. You have to go, well, the streets are closed. And if that's the only answer you have, then the answer coming back down the line from the Sea Org, from management, is going to be, and what's your fucking solution, asshole?
The why is God in that case.
Yeah, you can't just why is God me. You can't just give me a problem. Committing a problem is a crime in Scientology. Look it up in the ethics book. You can't do that. So you got to come up with solutions to these problems. That's why you're there. That's the attitude about holding a job in Scientology, is you're there to solve the problems, not report on them. So, but that doesn't mean that people do that or that they always make it go right. This is where that whole supreme test and, the ability of a Thetan to make it go right. This was invoked all the time.
Double down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because management, again, another reality check here is a lot of the people who work in management had very little or no experience working in an org. So they don't know what they're ordering into. And that's going to give you unreal orders that people don't want to follow or even look at or read. And because there is a distance problem, you have to be convincing. You can't just write an order and just say, "Well, get it done." And that, if you have that as the only tool in your toolbox as a manager, you're not going to be very effective. Like I said, you kind of learn who these people are over time, and you learn how to kind of appeal to them and that sort of thing. Or word things in such a way that they'll understand what you mean and get it done. But it's a skill. It was a skill that I had to hone over years, and a lot of people in management didn't. And so they wouldn't even get answers to their communications at all. There'd just be nothing, much less compliance, And this was sort of this push-pull of the tension between management and the orgs. And so we were using these tools of statistics and stat analysis and data files and programs to try to get the orgs going and working and expanding. And the flag reps, the people on the ground, were there to be our eyes and ears. And over the years of Scientology, through the 70s and 80s, more network postings were created. There was a flag representative to start with, and then there was an LRH communicator who is another Sea Org member, often a Sea Org member, sometimes not. This goes back and forth. Flag reps have always had to be Sea Org members. LRH comms, not always. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's another network staff posting that's supposed to be a Sea Org member called the flag banking officer, who's supposed to basically be the middleman between the org and an actual bank.
Yeah.
And it manages all the finances and money flows of the church that they're in charge of.
Takes care of the accounts and allocates every week.
That's right. That's right. No money is getting spent in that org without the FBO's approval.
Bean theory.
Even if the ED wants it and everybody else wants it, if the FBO's like, it's not happening. That's why they're there.
That you, based on what I've read from learning about FBOs and finance, the fact that you cannot appeal the FBO's decision, it automatically creates a fucking problem.
Oh, of course it does. But you can always appeal up the line too, right? You can go to the FBO senior, dear sir, right?
But how often does that actually work?
Networks. What's that?
How often does that actually work? How often would the FBO person in charge of that stuff just be like, they know what they're doing, shut the fuck up?
Yeah, no, that happens most of the time, but not always. And sometimes the FBOs are wrong. I mean, context is everything with these things. Sometimes the FBOs are fucking up. It depends an awful lot on the situation. In fact, it depends completely on the situation as far as that goes. There's no blanket, the management networks are always right. But of course, the Sea Org will be biased towards its own. But but the flag reps are also the ones who get the brunt of the blame for the down statistics in the org. They're the Sea Org members who are on the ground who are supposed to be making it go right.
They should be at cause.
The programs chief, the flag rep is basically the one hearing from the programs chief every week. And the programs chief is telling the flag rep what's up. The programs chief might talk nice to the ED because they don't want to piss them off or try to, go too far with them. But the flag rep is a Sea Org member. Motherfucker, you better get your fucking stat. It's like this kind of thing. It's like, I don't want to hear any fucking bullshit this week. These motherfucking stats better be up. Right? That's why you're there. And, this kind of approach, right, is often how flag reps were talked to. They were given very little mercy. And they're given an impossible task. They get sent to an org with like 20 people bumbling around with 50 orders coming down into the org every week from all these different people to all these different staff, right, through this whole divisional system. And it's a mess. It's just a jumbled mess. And so there really isn't anybody who is going to, miraculously step in and make this whole thing work. It can't work with the way it's put together. And that's kind of, this really interesting reality is it sounds like it would make sense, but trying to make it work, forget it. It doesn't.
But you would think with the fact that when the flag rep is down there, he's got the eyes and ears. He knows what's going on locally. For example, that street closure.
Yep. And that flag rep would send a telex up right away. Dear sir, we're going to get we want to get these program targets done, but what's happening right now is the whole street's closed. And so, and again, depending on the situation, the programs chief now has to decide what to do about that. What are they going to do? And the ED is supposed to be figuring out on the ground, okay, street's closed. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Let's go. It's never an excuse, in other words. It's okay, that's the situation, but what are you going to do about it? That's what they want to know. And the flag rep ends up being the problem solver if the ED is a wet blanket or can't get the job done.
Okay.
And then the flag rep is the one running the org, but the flag rep's not supposed to be running the org, the ED is. And you can get these really weird dynamics going on. And you also
basically have them both running the org at the same time with the orders that they're getting from both sets of people, for the flag rep and for whoever the ED is getting communications from.
Correct. But there is a network coordination committee that happens at the org level and at the continental level, which is supposed to coordinate the orders going into the org, so everybody has a smooth sailing to-do list, and it's not a bunch of cross orders. And ask me how efficient and well-run those network coordination committees are.
You wouldn't need a fucking committee for it if it worked right from the fucking beginning.
Yeah, no, the whole thing is, like I said, it's a jumbled mess.
So they fuck up and they try to fix their mistake by creating more fuck-ups.
Well, okay, so the thing that throws all this off is not even the fact that this whole system is just so unworkable. I mean, it's very complicated, but bureaucracies are. And what I've described to you is way simpler than the US government, for example. Mm-hmm. Way simpler in every aspect. It should work. But it doesn't because of a couple things. One, the cross orders, which are never coordinated adequately or well enough. And two, the fact that income demand supersedes everything else. So no matter what you're working on to get a new reg on post this week, or get a new supervisor in the course room, or get 50 new people in to expand the number of staff, public in, or something like that, these are targets that take hours and hours of work to actually accomplish. Mm-hmm. Getting 50 new people on course is weeks of work. Getting a person hired is hours and hours to find somebody, recruit them, get them signed up, get them arrived. It's work. It can take weeks just to get that done. And that's one target on one program. And you're going to give this org like 50 different targets to get done? So despite, even if everything wasn't cross-ordering each other, the volume of orders going into the orgs is way, way, way too much.
And that's where you get pending
especially
baskets
with
a mile
orgs
high.
that have. What's that?
I said, and that's where you get pending baskets a mile high.
Oh my God. Oh, huge, right? You'll have drawers full of orders and stuff. It comes out of your pending basket and just, goes in the round file after a while. And the staff aren't there to deal with management. The staff are there to deal with the public. But management distracts them so much because this whole management system kind of exists for itself. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist really for the orgs. If it did, it would back way the hell off and just give the orgs exactly what they need and nothing more. But it doesn't do that. It's the exact opposite. It's pile everything onto the orgs and demand that they get all of it done all now. And that's where they go psychotic. It's just completely nuts, That's why the system really doesn't work, is because it's not being run in any kind of rational way. Mm-hmm. Every single thing at every level of Scientology. And there's Miscavige, there's international management, upper middle management, lower middle management, then the orgs. So that whole system and every level of it is doing all this insanity that I've described to you, right? So it's all nuts.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's Scientology, baby. That's how it works.
That opened up a lot of new information for me.
Well, I'm glad I could help. There's a lot of stuff. I hope I hope people are because I had years to assimilate all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it took years to assimilate it. It took me about 2 years before I really started to feel like I knew what I was doing at my job when I was in Sea Org management. It's a lot.
So during those 2 years, you're just constantly worried that you're gonna fuck up somehow, and
absolutely. Before I had any confidence in my stat analysis or my org analysis or my handlings for crash statistics, it took about 2 years for me to get my wits around that whole process and how to do it and how to present on it at meetings to senior people so that they thought I knew what I was doing too.
Could you give a brief example?
You have to not only come up with handlings, they have to work. Mm-hmm. And the stats have to go back up. And if you know what you're doing and you have a rapport with the staff and you tell them the right things to do, the stats will go up. It can work. I've made it work. But it's, the bigger picture of it makes it crazy and unworkable.
Mm-hmm. So could you tell me about those meetings and presentations to management? Could you go into more detail about how those go? Because I'd be very interested in learning these inner workings.
Yeah. Okay. Well, basically what happened is the continental level NCC, the Network Coordination Committee, got hijacked very early on by RTC.
Was that back in the 80s?
And then what's that?
Was that back in the 80s?
No. I'm talking about when I was in the Sea Org.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I joined the Sea Org in 1995. Yeah. Um, and in 1998, yeah, 1996, the Golden Age of Tech, Part 1, Phase 1, the very first international program from David Miscavige of real consequence. He had issued a few orders, sort of blanket orders, a few years before, but in 96 is when Miscavige really started going to town on flexing his public presence as a Sea Org leader and manager, and bypassed all of management in telling the orgs what to do directly. And the way he did that is he issued a series of orders or programs. He issued a few programs under the heading of the Inspector General Network Bulletins. It was an RTC level order.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as high as it gets in Scientology. There is nobody above Miscavige. He's God.
Yeah.
Right? So he's telling the orgs what to do in a series of programs that were issued in 1998, because 2 years after he releases the Golden Age of Tech, nobody's taking off. Nothing's happening. Scientology is not booming. Auditors are not being made in highest ever numbers. The course rooms are not going anywhere. Nothing's happening. And he's like, this was my brainchild, and this is the most beautiful, wonderful, ideal situation that Scientology's ever been in, and you fuckers are all fucking it up. You fucking staff, you didn't do any of this, and I've told you guys what to do, and you didn't do it. So now I'm bypassing all of management, and I'm issuing these orders in the form of programs, and you're going to get them done. And it was 3 different programs. There was IG Network Bulletin 29 and 30 and 32.
Okay.
And they were programs that the orgs were expected to get done. And we dropped everything to get those programs done. One target of one of those programs, there is a art to writing program targets that can actually get done.
Mm-hmm.
And Miscavige has no fucking idea how to do it. One target of one of his programs was get 20 auditors on post producing. 20.
Good luck getting 2.
Most orgs don't have 20 staff, period. Very few orgs, Scientology churches now, have 20 trained auditors around them to recruit. They just don't exist. And every org is given a direct order by David Miscavige to get 20 auditors on post right the fuck now. And his patience is like not there. So this is to get done. And this is issued in 1998. And like I said, we dropped everything. There were many other targets on those programs than just the 20 auditors. Like I said, that was just a sample of one target, right? Mm-hmm. There was another target to review every PC folder of every person who had ever gotten auditing and find out what went wrong that they didn't continue on Scientology and get them back in and get them fixed.
Okay.
That was one set of targets. There were about 3 or 4 targets that encompassed what I just said. Every org was supposed to drop everything and do this. It took years to get this shit done. Years of push on the orgs to get them to get these things done. After 5 years, by 2003, there was one org that had 20 auditors. I went down to San Diego And I made it 2 orgs that had 20 auditors. I did that in 3 weeks.
Damn.
It was a fucking miracle. I goosed the staff into production. I didn't do it personally. I went down there and I made them do it, but they did it. And I took everything else off their plate. All we were working on was 20 auditors. That's what it took. And I had 20 fucking staff working on this for 3 straight weeks. This is all they did. There was one guy in the course room. The auditors were auditing and everybody else was on getting auditors.
Yeah.
And we did it. We got 20. And it took a month. And that was getting one target of Miscavige's orders done in one org. You know, that was the kind of effort that it would take to get things done. And the staff were not into doing that. They had other things they had to do running their churches. You see what I mean? So you're getting pushed to do all this stuff that sounds like sensible stuff, but you know, you got to do the day-to-day of running the org too. And the clash of these things is why management of Scientology is so endlessly frustrating, you know? So these programs come down. Now, I've set this stage and sort of laid out for you what's happening at the orgs and kind of with us in trying to implement Miscavige's orders, these programs. But at the continental level, we're getting our asses kicked every day of the week, 7 days a week, by RTC staff members who work right under David Miscavige. They're posted in PAC at Big Blue. And their job is to kick our asses and get us to get the orgs to get this stuff done. So they're meeting with us every single day. And the way they did this is they took the format of the time and people who went to the Continental Level Network Coordination Committee, NCC.
Yeah.
And they just took over the meeting. And all of us had to go. I was not part of NCC, Continental NCC, but I was now because RTC wanted it. And they just bypassed everybody. And they were very loud about the fact that they were doing that. But they bypassed us only to the degree that they were yelling and screaming at us. They weren't actually doing our jobs. They didn't really do the danger formula. They just used the danger formula to make us feel like a bunch of assholes, right? So anyway, we had to meet every single day with RTC and explain to them what we were getting done, org by org, target by target, day by day. We at management were being run day by day on every single org. That went on for years. And let's just say I can summate that horrific, awful daily experience by simply saying that there was much gnashing of teeth and rending of garments.
A lot of face ripping.
It was as bad as you can imagine. There were so many instances of straight up character assassination right in front of everybody, public humiliation right in front of everybody, because pretty much all of Continental management was there packed into this room. There were probably about 25 people every day meeting in this room. Sometimes they'd bring the captains of the Sea Org orgs in as well and make them report directly to RTC with all of management sitting there, what they were doing to get the IG network bulletins, Miscavige's programs, right? What were they doing to get it done? RTC wanted to put them right on the pressure plate, right in front of all of us. Mm-hmm. And then the captains would be sent out of the room, and then we would get grilled on what we're doing to get the IG network bulletins done. And when they found out that there were orgs out there, for example, and this went on for years. This didn't go on for days or weeks or months. Mm-hmm. This went on for years, from 1998 until, the whole time I was there. Actually, NCC was a daily thing. It took about 4 or 5 years before RTC stopped showing up every day. I believe it was about 4 or 5 years. Jesus. that we were reporting directly to RTC every day. And it was about 2 years in before these, idiots actually found out that there were orgs that didn't have auditors at all. There were no auditors there. Albuquerque, for example, there's just no auditor. Las Vegas, right? These like little pipsqueak places. And to say that they were pissed about that fact would be an understatement, right? Suddenly I was on the the hot seat. That was not a pleasant day for me. That was a very unpleasant week, in fact. Because I was given 24 hours to get an auditor on post in every org. 24 hours. This was the daily of my life as a Sea Org manager. So I tell you about the stats and the data files and these evals and all this stuff, but then you can see from what I'm saying here, right, that Miscavige is so psychotic, and the way he runs this organization is so absolutely crazy that this whole system, even if it was workable, is just kind of pushed to the side and run in name only.
Yeah.
Because you're really not getting anything done. And this is why this Miscavige influence is completely, totally, horrifically a violation of everything L. Ron Hubbard said to do as far as running in orgs go. Hubbard did it too.
Oh yeah.
Miscavige didn't just learn all this all on his own, right? I mean, Hubbard was a horrible manager. So Hubbard might have written or had his name put on this system, but he misran it as well. Bottom line is, this is one of the key reasons why Scientology doesn't go anywhere. Because you got a lot of Sea Org staff, hundreds of them, wrapped up in this system of management. There's other Sea Org members who are doing other things that have nothing to do with management. But the people who are involved in this, you just go crazy.
Yeah.
Trying to work in this system, That was my experience of it, at least.
Definitely gives me a lot to think about, and when it comes to the actual organization of all this shit. Like, I saw your video from early on in your channel where you talk about Scientology's organizational madness, but
yeah,
this ability to talk to you and go levels deeper is extremely fun for me.
Cool. I'm glad I could spend some time clarifying this. I'd like to get going today because we've been at this for a little while, but I'm more than happy to talk more about this stuff.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
There's more stuff out here to answer, but what I've given you is the framework of it. This is how management works.
I was going to say, if you get any ideas as to topics, feel free to write them down and send them over.
Yeah. No, this is a lot of it. Yeah. All right, man. Cool.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to the usual bullshit. I have a Discord server and an email address in the description below. I will also be linking Chris's channel. And I want to thank you for joining me today and going down this deep dive. So I will talk to all of you later. Peace out.